There's another one you don't want to hear. Frankly, they do I.
One, two, three, set, go.
Right now on the Power Chord Hour, I'm very excited to be welcoming back to the show for the very first time since 2019. We are talking to Tim Rogner of the band Allister, and this year marks 20 years since the band released 2002's pop-punk staple Last Stop Suburbia. We're going to discuss the writing and recording of the album, that era of the band, really get into it. And on top of that, if you were near the Pittsburgh area, I'm very excited for this one. Allister is playing day 2 of this year's 4-Chord Music Fest. Mark that down, Saturday, September 10th. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, unless Allister has played there since the last time I saw them play Pittsburgh, I think it's the first time they're playing there since like 2014. So if you're in the area, you definitely want to check that out. So we're going to talk that show, Last Stop Suburbia, and a whole lot more with Tim. Tim, how are you, man?
I am good, dude. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, doing really good. I'm excited to talk about this record. I had a great time talking to you a few years ago. I can't believe it's been 3 years, but a few years back.
I know.
And actually last time we were kind of dissecting. At that point, you're doing the 20 years and counting that just came out, and kind of dissecting that record. So now we'll do a little bit with Last Stop Suburbia. So I mean,
for sure.
Like take us. Let's go to like the beginning. And, when you start thinking of Last Stop Suburbia, just really thinking of the next album, like how long after Dead Ends and Girlfriends was the thought of hey, we got to do another album? Like how long after that were you starting to write what would eventually become Last Stop Suburbia?
You know what's funny is we were actually starting to write some of the songs that made it on the Last Stop Suburbia, I think at the end of our session for Dead Ends and Girlfriends. So we had a whole bunch of songs ready to go for Dead Ends and Girlfriends. And towards the end of that session, and like right after we finished recording that record, was when we started writing a whole bunch of new songs. And we didn't necessarily have a timeline, because we had just signed with Drive-Thru. We were just kind of getting our feet wet, with serious touring, like nationwide, full US touring. We had done some touring in the past, but it wasn't, super extensive. And so we wrote a bunch of songs, I think, before we left on like, our second or third major tour, and then just kind of kept going from there. And we knew we wanted to get a new record out. We spent so much time touring that it just took a little bit longer than we would have liked. But we had most of the songs written. We just never really, we needed a couple more, I think. And so finally we had a chance to stop being on the road for about 5 or 6 months and finally wrap up the writing. I think we wrote like 4 or 5 more songs for Last Stop Suburbia. And then we were finally ready to go into the studio.
Did you, like you were saying, you kind of wrote some of those initial songs after Dead Ends, then you went on tour. Were you playing any of these songs live before the album came out, and any of those Last Stop Suburbia songs? Were you like fleshing those out live and stuff before they got recorded?
We were, yeah. As a matter of fact, so I very distinctly remember playing Radio Player and Somewhere in Fullerton and Overrated before Last Stop Suburbia even came out, because those were some of the first couple songs that we wrote, I think, for Last Stop Suburbia. I think those were the ones that were kind of just after just after Dead Ends and Girlfriends recording session wrapped up. And so we were like, well, these songs are kind of good. Like, maybe we should try playing them live just to kind of see how they go over. Like, we like them at least. And so we played them at a handful of shows, and I'm pretty sure Somewhere in Fullerton and Overrated were kind of a staple in our set before that record even came out.
Oh, wow. And I mean, also like with that, I mean, were the songs pretty much already in the form that we would know them now? Or, I mean, were they any, kind of different at all before, pre Last Stop Suburbia, when you were just kind of, you wrote them and started playing them live? I mean, were they totally different, or are they about what you'd hear later on once they made it onto the record?
They were almost exactly what you hear on the record. We did very little production, like I'll put that in air quotes. I know you can't see me, but quote unquote production work when we recorded Last Stop Suburbia. So the songs themselves, were basically written, and however we wrote them is kind of just about 99% how they ended up on that record.
Does that tend to be for Allister? I mean, do you guys tend to be a band where it's like your kind of first idea or first take's probably the best? Like, you almost don't want to mess around with that stuff too much?
Totally. Yeah, we do. We were not, because look at the stuff we play. It's pop punk. It's three chords. It's not necessarily the type of music you want to sit around and overthink. You just kind of crank some of these songs out and then you move on to the next one. And I think maybe there were a couple parts here and there where our producer and engineer Chris Futerich had suggested, well, maybe let's move like a pre-chorus to here. Maybe let's switch up two chords, just to give it maybe a little bit of a different flavor. But that was, few and far between on some of those songs.
Well, that's what I was going to ask too. I mean, like when you guys did go into the studio, was it pretty much all songs written and fleshed out for the most part? Like, was it basically written and ready when you hit the studio, or was there any like writing or any like new songs that you wrote while you were recording Last Stop Suburbia?
No, there were no songs that we wrote while we were recording. But I do remember very vividly the last song that we wrote for Last Stop Suburbia was actually the first track off it, called Scratch. And we were staying at our drummer's house for like 2 days or 3 days, I think, to like practice and rehearse, to make sure that we were tight before we left to go record. Because Last Stop Suburbia was recorded in California. And so we spent 3 days before we left at our drummer's house, like in central Illinois, practicing, all day and rehearsing. And Scratch was a song that came out of those 3 days. And we really liked it. And we're like, this has to go on the record. Like, yeah, it's brand new, but it's a cool song. So we need to make sure we put this on the record. And it did. Obviously it ended up being the first track, and we were all pretty excited about that. So that was kind of a cool thing.
I mean, it's a great album opener. I think it's a really good way to like kick off the album. And I mean, I guess now I'm curious too, like for one, before you wrote Scratch, I don't know if you had already kind of had the sequencing or ideas in your head for the album, but I mean, was there ever a idea for another song to be the album opener on there? Because now I'm kind of interested in knowing if before Scratch was written, if there was one before that where you go, that's the album opener. Was there one you were initially going to go with before writing that?
That's a good question.
I know you might not have been into sequencing at that point. I guess I'm not entirely sure.
That's kind of where my head is at right now. I don't think we really thought, too much ahead at that point, because we actually didn't even really demo all of the songs for Last Stop Suburbia. I think we ended up demoing like maybe eight or nine of them. So we only really had recorded demo copies of 8 or 9. So the rest of the songs, the other 6 or 7 or whatever, were just in our heads. We didn't have them down on tape or anything. And so we hadn't really thought about sequencing at all. And we didn't even really think about sequencing until the record was finished, until we kind of heard all the songs. And then that's kind of when we went through and we're like, okay, I think this is kind of how we should order, the songs.
I'm always interested in that part, and when you do get into like sequencing and playing around, because I mean, I feel like me as a listener, probably a lot of people, like when you listen to your favorite records for like 20 years, I feel like it's so ingrained where you go, obviously Scratch is the album opener. Like,
right.
You would never do anything else. But then you forget there's a time when you're like writing this record. It's not like you guys are like, there we go. We got to sit down and write like a great album opener, and we got to do it this way or something. So it's kind of fun to get into like the development of that, because now I can't imagine it opening with another song. Like I just can't even think of another song on the record that I'd open it with, but it's funny to kind of like, hear the progression of those things and kind of how like everything unfolds. So, I mean,
yeah, I agree. It's weird. Sorry. I mean,
oh no, you're fine.
Real quick. It's interesting to me too, how like as a band, for Allister, we never thought about those kind of things, right? Like I said, we just kind of cranked out these 3-chord songs and then moved on to writing the next song and then moved on to writing the next song. So we never really thought twice about these songs. But it's always interesting to me, and I've noticed this, and I'm sure every band goes through this, but I've really noticed it just over, the 25 years or however long I've been recording records, is that when you do an album, like, even if you don't have a plan like that, each song tends to kind of naturally find its place on the record as you record it. They end up coming out a certain way, or there's a certain vibe to certain songs, even if it was unintended in the first place. It ends up that way when it goes on tape, and they just kind of naturally, most of the time, I think they just kind of naturally fall into the right places, and it seems obvious, I think, when the record's done. Like, I don't remember for sure, but I'm almost 100% that without a doubt, when we heard all the songs, we were like, well, yeah, Scratch has to be number one. It's a good opening song. It just makes the most sense, and we knew we were kind of all in agreement that Radio Player was potentially going to be like single-ish, perhaps. It was like, one of the catchier songs, I think, and we could envision perhaps some sort of radio play. And I think bands tend to, at least pop and radio bands tend to put, their singles second or third kind of early on in the sequencing. So we kind of knew that one was going to come sooner. And then the rest just kind of fell naturally into place.
I got to give you credit there too. I mean, as we're talking about like sequencing of a record, because with it falling into place the way it does, and honestly, that record is sequenced, I think, very well. I feel like the pacing of it works. Like, just every song really is in the place it should be. But with that said, how many tracks are on that? I mean, we're talking like 16 or 17, right?
I think it was 16, yeah.
So, I mean, and credit to you, because there are a lot of records that do have 16 or 17 songs, and no matter how well sequenced it is, I think somewhere in there, I think the more songs you have, the harder it is to like find that place where they should be placed. And that one, I gotta say, it never really has the lull, because there are some records with like a lot of songs in that way where, maybe it's really good for like the first 12 songs, but that like 13 through 15 are kind of like, well, maybe we could have
it starts to drag.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, that 29th, 32nd minute of the album is like, oh, come on, let's go.
Yeah, so I mean, big credit to you guys, because yeah, it really again, I feel like the more songs you have, and I mean, I do think it's maybe easier to do with like, say, a 10-track album, but I think the more songs you get in, the more you can fall into that where, hell, I mean, if you sequence it wrong, yeah, the song might lull the album. Maybe it is a good song, but maybe it would have been better as like a track 6 or something. Like, so credit to you on that. And just,
thank you.
And everything kind of falling into place with that. But like getting into, I know you said you guys recorded Last Stop Suburbia in California. What studio did you record at?
This has absolutely been driving me crazy, because for the life of me, I cannot remember the name of the studio. I think it changed names like every couple years. Oh. And I don't even think it's there anymore, but I remember obviously exactly what it looked like and where it was. It was in Venice Beach, California. And it was literally, like, I'm not even exaggerating, it was on the beach. Oh, so nice. If you walked out the front door of the studio and you turned right and you walked about, 50 steps, you were on the beach. There was like a road, and then there was the beach. And it was awesome because we stayed in the Oakwood Apartments in Marina del Rey, which was about a mile away. And we would either walk or like skateboard to the studio down the boardwalk every single day.
Oh man,
right on the beach.
So nice.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
I mean, going with that, and I'm always kind of interested in this because I've asked people, and you get a little bit of both, but I know those songs were pretty much written by the time you got to that studio, but do you think your surroundings in that environment like influence the sound or anything at all? Like that record is such a good, I think, summertime record. And I mean, do you think any of that has to do with that surroundings recording in that way, or do you think, or were they already basically like that by the time you got there? I mean, I like this because people kind of go both ways. Some people are like environment has a lot to do with it. Some are like, no, it really has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, honestly, I've never really thought about that before. I I would say perhaps subconsciously, maybe a little bit of that kind of got ingrained in the record. I think more so though, it was just such a relaxed atmosphere for us. Like A, we were on the beach. B, we were doing what we love to do. C, it was essentially our first real record, and we still didn't really know any better, and we didn't necessarily feel any pressure, right? Because yes, we had put out Dead Ends and Girlfriends, but we recorded that album like in 4 days for $700. So
Oh
that
my
wasn't even
God.
a thing for us. Like we didn't even consider that a record. It was just a whole bunch of songs that we recorded in a couple of days. But this felt like a record, and there was still no pressure, because we hadn't developed a huge or a big following yet. So it was still just us making a record, but doing it, legitimately. So there wasn't a whole lot, I think, that we really had to worry about. And I think because of that, we were able to focus just on playing and having fun and letting some of that fun creep into the record, when we were doing it.
That's interesting. Like also, like just kind of that, like you were saying, like in a lot of ways for you guys at the time, like feeling like your first record. I mean, do you still, and that'd be kind of interesting as the guy who like wrote it, like, does it still, Last Stop Suburbia, feel like spiritually the first like Allister record to you?
Yes and no. It feels like the first real record, that we did. Although I know it's our second record. I know it's in the grand scheme of things. I know it's number two, but it feels like our first foray into being a real band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And being really legit into the music industry. And that's what it feels like for me.
No, I mean, it is interesting, like all those things you were talking about, like that may have kind of made it come out the way it did, but it does feel, and I love Dead Ends and Girlfriends, but it does, there is this shift, I feel like, on Last Stop Suburbia, where kind of like you're talking about, like it really is kind of, I feel like a real bona fide band, like something about it where it's like this, like you're really now you're really seeing the full potential, I think, of the band on a Last Stop Suburbia. So I mean, at least from the outside, but I always like hearing that too. It's interesting because I mean, people have the connections with these. Obviously, we're talking like this album 20 years later. The audience has a connection, but I also like hearing that because, like, I mean, you're the one who wrote it, so your relationship with these albums and these songs and everything are going to be different than say just the listener probably would be.
Yeah. And I think part of it, I mean, obviously we're still just a pop punk band and we don't necessarily write about anything real serious, but I do think that part of that may be because the songs that we wrote for Dead Ends and Girlfriends, we wrote when we were 15 or 16 years old. Those were songs like the very first songs that we started writing when we formed the band. Even before the band was even started, these were just little ideas we had kind of laying around. But Last Stop Suburbia, the songs were actually written like, after we were, I don't know, I think most of those songs were written between the ages of like 18 and 20. Maybe 19 and 20, 19, 20, 21, because I think we were 21 or 22 when we recorded that album. And so even though, that's not old, that's a jump, age-wise between being 15 and 16 and writing songs for Dead End and Girlfriend and being, 19, 20 and writing songs for Last Stop Suburbia. So I hesitate to use the word mature because I realize that sounds kind of funny coming from us, but in a sense, I think the songs were a little bit more at least thought out.
No, that makes, and you, I mean, you are right though. That is a big eight, like 15, and then like, your teens and then your early 20s. I definitely think there's a difference. Plus, even just naturally, you've gone to write, you've gone to be a band, you've kind of learned how all of you kind of work together, like,
Yeah, absolutely.
But kind of getting back into the recording process of Last Stop Suburbia too. I mean, how long were you guys in the studio for that? How long did that take to record?
I want to say it was about a month. It was about 4 weeks, I believe, and it was February. I think it was like mid-February of 2002 to mid-March of 2002. So sometime right around there. It was either 4 or 5 weeks.
And then,
Is about how long we were in there.
how soon after recording it did it come out? I can't remember the release day, but not too long after, right?
Yeah, I think it was about 6 months because
Oh.
I think the record ended up actually maybe it was all of March that we were in the studio. Now that I think about it, because the record then came out I think the first week of October. It was supposed to come out in August, but there was I forget exactly why it got delayed. Something happened, like we couldn't finish the artwork because we were on Warped Tour and we couldn't get pictures done or something. I forget exactly what happened, but there was some sort of delay. And so ours got pushed back to October. So it came out, 5 months or so after we had finished recording it.
And I also want to talk about too on that record with you, like your guitar rig for Last Stop Suburbia. Were you pretty much sticking to like the same guitar and amp situation for like every song? Were you mixing things up in the studio gear wise? What were you kind of playing on that album?
Yeah, for the most part, we kind of found a formula that worked. So at the time, I was playing a Fender Fat Strat with a humbucker in the bridge pickup, and I believe I was playing out of either a Matchless or a JCM 800. I can't, because I think we had like 7 or 8 different amps to choose from. And I know John was playing out of his Gibson, his Les Paul studio, I think out of a dual rectifier, a Mesa rectifier. And that was kind of the sound that we stuck with. Those were the 2 tones that we got that we liked, that we used for probably, 80 to 90% of the album. I think there was a couple songs where we, put in some maybe minor effects, or use something a little bit different, maybe some cleaner tones on a few things. But yeah, the majority of it was, for the most part, plug and play.
Everything worked. I mean, I feel like the tone and everything, it's kind of, I mean, it's like earlier we were talking about, like, if you guys kind of go with like the first take or your first ideas, it's almost like, yeah, you really don't have to mess with that. Like the tone worked with everything. The guitars sound really well with it. So yeah, maybe it wouldn't have been good if you guys started, like, you found a reverb pedal or like a delay pedal or something like that. Maybe the album wouldn't be the classic that we all love now.
Yeah. And it's really funny because honestly, I do not remember spending any time at all getting tones. Like, I remember because we had 7 or 8 different amps to choose from. And I think we took, I don't know, 4 hours one day and plugged them all in just to see which ones we liked. And there was a couple that, sucked. And so we just didn't even bother with them. And, but then, we didn't spend a whole lot of time dialing something in. If we once we found the head that we liked the most, we dialed something in and that was it. We just went with it. And that's kind of our personalities to begin with and just the way that we operated as a band. And we were still young and we didn't really think about tones and we didn't really think about, the sound of something. We were just excited to be recording an album. And, I think a little bit to this day, we still kind of think that way. Like, just, this is punk rock. Let's just plug in and play and just, rock people.
No, I think sometimes it's the best way to do it. But even with that though, like, have you ever been interested on the, even like outside of Allister? I mean, have you ever gotten into that side of things of like the recording and production side and like spending ungodly hours like searching for a tone and doing any of that? Has any of that ever interested you, or is that just across the board you're not really into that side of things?
I am now more so, much more so than I was before. Tones, not necessarily. I can usually dial in a pretty good tone fairly quickly these days. I kind of have an idea of what I like and what I want to sound like, and I know how to get that relatively quickly. So I don't typically spend too much time dialing in tones. But what I've really gotten into lately is using effects pedals, and just experimenting with different, like sonically with different tonal ideas, delay pedals, reverb pedals, pitch shifters, and things like that.
Nice.
As I got older, I think it just trying to just broaden the things that I can do or listen to. And it's fun, at least now it just gives me a little more experimentation.
Oh, definitely, definitely. For the for touring for Last Stop Suburbia, like I know a second ago you were saying you guys were playing Warped Tour and stuff not long before the record came out. Was what did touring look like for this record? Were you pretty much, once it came out, you just hit the ground running, hitting on the road? Did you play internationally at all for that album? Like, what touring look like for Last Stop Suburbia?
Yeah, we did. In fact, if you notice, I believe in the artwork for Last Stop Suburbia, so we did Warped Tour that summer before the album came out, and the photo that's in Last Stop Suburbia of the four of us, I think there's two photos of us, but one of them you can see there's like stormy skies in the background.
I know exactly the one you're talking about.
And that was taken in Florida on the Warped Tour, and there was bad weather coming, and we're like, this actually might look really cool with our album. Let's see if we can get some pictures. And so we did, and it worked out really well.
That is hilarious, because I've always thought, I know exactly the one you're talking about. I've
Yeah.
always liked that picture, but I assumed that was like doctored or like something was done with it. I didn't realize it's pretty natural. That was just where you were that day.
Totally. Yep. Totally natural photo of just outside in Florida during some crazy summer weather that they were having.
Oh my God.
But to answer your question more directly, yeah, once that album came out, it was basically nonstop touring for us for 3 years until we did the next record. And that included, we went to Japan a couple of times. We did the UK. We did Europe. We did. I'm trying to think. We did a Canadian tour, but I think that may have been after our third record came out. But yeah, we spent as much time as we could on the road because none of us really liked being at home. There wasn't a whole lot for us to do at home. We didn't really want to work real jobs, and so the only way for us to try to make any money at all was to stay on the road. And so that's just kind of what we did, and I think that made it a little bit harder for us to write and record, and that's what took 3 years in between the next record, was just because we spent so much time touring. We didn't really write songs a lot when we were on the road.
It seems hard, like, to write, like, some people I've talked to will write on the road, but the majority it seems like a very difficult place to try to write music. Does not seem like the best setting.
Yeah, I can see it both ways. Like you said, some people do it well and do it often, and that just kind of wasn't what we did as a band. Occasionally, I would write a song while we were on the road, but it wasn't very frequent.
Do you remember some of the bands you toured with, like during those, like for the Last Stop Suburbia era? You remember some of the bands you hit the road with?
Yeah, so we did. I'm trying to remember if this was just before Last Stop Suburbia came out or if it was right after. I think maybe it was just before, but we did a tour with Real Big Fish and Sugar Cult. I think when the record came out, we did a really big tour with Flogging Molly and Andrew WK. And that was really cool because I think that was like close to a full nationwide tour. I don't think we made it to California or like the West Coast, but I know that we played like Denver and everywhere on the East Coast.
Oh, nice.
So that was really good. And then we did, of course, we did like the Drive-Thru tour. We did a couple of headlining tours. I think with maybe Hidden in Plain View. Um, it's hard to remember sometimes because so many of the tours kind of all jumble into one, and it's hard to remember which one was which
Oh, and we're
and
looking
when it
back
happened.
20 years too. Like throw
Yeah,
20 years on
right.
top of it. I do not fault you if you're not 100% accurate with if you can't remember every single detail of
But
things.
those are the big ones. And I know we did tours with Less Than Jake, a couple tours with Less Than Jake actually, and those were always really great.
I
Um, those are the big ones I can remember.
Well, that was the other thing too. I was going to ask. I mean, was this, for the most part, for Last Stop Suburbia, that era, are these mostly openers or headliners? Like, what was the majority of, of the touring on that? Were you still kind of opening for bands during that era?
Yeah, I think the majority of the tours that we did, we were still opening, for bigger bands. Like we opened with Andrew for Andrew WK, and we opened for Less Than Jake. We opened for Real Big Fish, and I think those helped us, significantly start to draw fans when we did, like a headlining tour. And then we did a couple of headlining tours of like, small clubs. But those are always kind of fun too, just to kind of see, how well, kind of gauge how well all of the hard work that you're putting in is actually paying off.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. That it totally makes sense. You get tighter as a band, and you just get better. I
Hmm.
feel like too. Going in, we're talking about like, I mean, you guys are pretty prepared. You hit the studio, and you knew the songs to Last Stop Suburbia and everything. Were there any that ended up that were recorded that didn't make the cut? I mean, were there any songs for those sessions that did get recorded that you just didn't release, or was basically everything you guys recorded made it onto the record?
Um, so let me think. There was I know there was one song in particular that didn't make it on the record, that we ended up releasing later on a 7-inch somewhere. But I don't remember if the song was written and just not recorded for Last Stop Suburbia, or if we actually recorded it and it didn't make it on the record. I feel like we did record it and it just didn't make it on the record. But if that's the one I'm thinking of, there was only one. It was just that one.
And then is
We didn't have like a handful of songs just that didn't make the cut. There was only the one, if that was even the case.
And then kind of, like we were talking about, like during, kind of writing some of these songs, Last Stop Suburbia, more during like the end of like the Dead Ends era. On the other side of that, I mean, were there any songs that not even recorded, but like ideas and stuff for songs for Last Stop Suburbia that didn't make the cut that ended up over on Before the Blackout? Were there any ideas kind of from that era that you ended up working more on when it came time for Before the Blackout?
Yeah, there was a few songs. There was a few songs that we had just kind of started writing towards the end, of our writing, I suppose, session for Last Stop Suburbia, that weren't quite finished yet. They were like half ideas or three-quarter ideas, that I ended up then using, I think, for a little bit of time in my other band, but then we ended up using them as Allister songs for Before the Blackout, and kind of finished them up. Not too many, maybe like two or three that I can recall.
I always like to ask this for Last Stop Suburbia. Were there any maybe it's not even a whole song, maybe it's just a part of a song. Was there anything on that record that was just a huge pain in the ass to get down and get right for one reason or another? Was there anything you remember just going like it just for whatever reason? Again, maybe it's not even hard. Maybe it was just getting the sound down, getting it down correctly. Was there just something you remember from that album being a pain in the ass to get recorded right?
Let me think. Yeah, I feel like, there was something weird going on with the song Overrated, and I don't necessarily recall what it was, but I remember that song for some reason being a bit of a struggle. Um, and there was one guitar part. I mean, it's three chords, it's not hard, but I just couldn't get it right. It was like a little slide or something that I had to do on the guitar, and I couldn't do it right. And I felt like when I was singing that song, I didn't sing it well, and I couldn't sing it right. To this day, that's probably the only song on that album that it bothers me. But it's the one song that I'm like, I feel like we could have done this one better. Like it just, it didn't come out as great as I would have hoped. But better only one song than 5 or 6 like that.
Yeah, you're not joking. Which also, because I was going to ask that too. I was going to ask, like, you know, as you listen 20 years later, if there was like anything you'd alter of the record, you know, be it a song or to change something, or if there was something about it. But it doesn't sound like there's many things. Just that song.
Yeah, no, there really isn't. There was one other song too. There's a song on the album called Waiting for You, I think it's called, towards the end of the album. Waiting for You, I think that's what it's called. And there was, so back then, well, still to this day, none of us are like, you know, good musicians by any means. We're like adequate at the guitar. We can play 3 chords, we can play some solos, you know. So we weren't like really good guitar players, and there was like a little guitar solo at the end or in the middle or at the end of that song that I wanted to have in there, and I just couldn't do it. Like, yeah, just my hands just don't work like that, and I'm not skilled enough to play. So we had Ariel from the Hippos. There's this old ska band from Southern California called the Hippos.
Yeah, I love the Hippos.
They were great. So Ariel came in one day and just ripped this guitar solo. Like, no joke. It was so funny. Like, he put the guitar on and he plays it like in one take. Like, I told him, I kind of explained like what I wanted. I was like, well, here's what I want. I was like, here's the idea. And he's like, okay, cool. Let me do something. And he like just did it in 1, maybe 2 takes. And I was just like, man, I would do anything to be able to play like that. So that was cool. So thanks to him for coming in and doing that for us.
Yeah, that is a nice little tidbit too about the a record when you listen to that solo now. You know, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm very excited for it. You know, you guys are playing 4 Chord Music Fest in September. I mean, I know we're a little ways away. Has the band? I mean, have you kind of figured out yet, set list wise? Have you rehearsed at all? Do you kind of know what you're doing for that show, or are we still a little early off for all those things?
I think it's a little early off, so we're talking about practicing. I guess that's the first step, right?
Absolutely.
So we'll probably be practicing, you know, I would imagine within the next couple of weeks, because we want to get at least a few in before that show. And we wanted to play, you know, the goal was to play all of Last Stop Suburbia from start to finish. Our set time doesn't allow for all of that, so I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna play majority of songs from Last Stop Suburbia. So I think we have like 35 minutes to play or something like that. 35 to 40 minutes, I forget exactly. So I think we're gonna try to play like 8 or 9 songs from Suburbia, and then probably 2 or 3 others. But we want to kind of keep with the Last Stop Suburbia, you know, 20-year celebration. So the majority of our set will be from that record.
Nice. I mean, I was thinking about it too. I mean, when was the last show Allister played? It's been a while, right?
Yeah, the last time we played together as a band was in 2019. We did Summer Sonic Festival over in Japan. It was August of 2019. That was the last time we played together as a band.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then the pandemic hit, you know, and we haven't been able to play. And Scotty, our bass player, lives full time over in Japan. So we don't ever really get together as a 4-piece, you know, to play and practice. And so, but now he's going to be able to come back and practice and get ready for the show. So it's going to be great.
No, I'm definitely looking forward to that show. I've not seen you guys since 2014 on that MXPX
Wow.
Zebrahead tour would have been the last time I
Oh,
saw it.
okay.
And the first time actually.
Okay.
What am I saying? This was the first and last time I saw you guys until now. Now we'll get to see you again. So I know I'm looking forward to it. I mean, again, like I feel like if people are Allister fans, they probably know that. Like when you play a show, go see it. You know, you're probably not going on 10 tours a year. So
Right.
check it out if you're coming to play, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Was that the one? Was that at Mr. Small's?
That one was at no, it was at that was at Altar Bar, actually,
Oh, that's
which
right.
is no
That's
longer
right.
there. R.I.P.
No?
Altar Bar. You know
Okay.
what? Legit might be a church again. It's something, but it's not a venue. It legitimately might be a church again, if I remember. It reverted back. But you played
funny.
actually you played two places. You played there, and then I saw you Buffalo the next day at the Waiting Room in Buffalo, which also no longer exists. So both
wow.
places you played last time no longer exist.
Man, sad state of affairs.
Absolutely. But just a few more here as we're kind of closing up. I mean, another Allister release that and I just thought of it the other day while I was writing questions, and I can't believe it's already 10, but I mean this year marks 10 years since 2012's Life Behind Machines, which it's just insane to me it's been out that long. But
Yeah.
I mean, just like a little off that one, like I really like that album. A lot of great songs on it. Like, where does that one fall for you in terms of like Allister's material? You know, 10 years later, when you look back on that record, you know, what are kind of your feelings on that one?
Thank you. Yeah, that record is actually my favorite record that Allister has ever released.
Oh, nice.
Just for a lot of reasons, I think. I like. I think it sounds great. We did it with our friend Mark McCluskey, who at the time he was living in Chicago, and we just kind of did it in his house. I think he lives in New York City now. But he's really good, and he's done a lot for our band to help us and help our sound, and that was just a fun record to make, again, because there was no pressure. We just we were kind of able to do it, and we released it, and I think it sounds really good. I think the songs are really good. I think it showcases some of our better songwriting abilities between Scotty and myself. I just think the songs on there are, generally speaking, more thought out and more well defined as songs, as opposed to just pop punk 3-chord songs. There's a little bit more to some of those songs, which I really liked. So that was really fun, and that's why I think that one's kind of my favorite.
It really is. It's a great record. I think it's aged very well too. Like listening back, I think 10 years down the road, still a solid listen. And I mean, I guess I know I'm far from the only one to ask you this, but I mean, and I had not even thought about it until then. I mean, you did the 20 years and counting in 2019, but like as far as a full length Allister record of new songs, that would have been the last one 10 years ago. I mean, do you see you guys eventually writing another one or doing another Allister record?
I don't know. I would like to say yes. The one thing I can say is I'll never say never. I've kind of learned that over the years. But I think that if the timing is right, and we're able to do it, I think we would be able to do a new full length. I know Scotty's really busy with a lot of his projects over in Japan. And me and the rest of the guys over here too. But none of us really ever stop writing songs, so I know I personally have this massive catalog of ideas and songs, and some of them are 90% finished, some of them are 100% finished, some of them are 20% finished, just different stages of songwriting. But I think it would be fairly easy to kind of go through some of the back material that Scotty and I have written over the last 10 years and pick and choose, 12 songs for a new Allister record. I think it would just be a matter of finding the time to do it, and then scheduling the time to do it.
Yeah, I would be excited for that, because it really did. It just hit me maybe a day or two ago. I mean, I knew it'd been a while, but I was like, damn, it's been 10 years since that album.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But
That is
again,
crazy.
a strong record. I do got to say, a very strong record. So
Yeah, thank you.
not a bad one for people like, if they are just discovering Alistair and it's like, what's the latest record? You got a good one for people to go listen to. Outside of Alistair, I mean, any of your other projects or bands, are you working on anything else at the moment?
Yeah, I got this other band called Hot Alice that's been playing. We got a show coming up in August at this bar in Naperville, Illinois, suburb of Chicago. And we're staying pretty busy doing that. We practice usually every weekend. We're trying to book more shows now that everything has kind of opened back up, and we keep writing. I'm actually before we started talking here, I'm demoing a new song right now for that band.
Oh,
Send over
nice.
to the guys. And so yeah, I'm staying busy with that. I'm just writing, taking care of my kids, doing the whole dad thing, which is cool.
Nah, that's nice though for music. I mean, as far as if people want new music from you, I mean, you are. I feel like you're, Alistair and beyond. Yeah, I feel like you're always doing something or have another kind of project going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like even if
yeah,
Alistair's not
definitely.
doing something, you're writing and playing music.
100%. Yeah, I'll never be able to stop doing that.
But as we close up, and I got like one more with Last Stop Suburbia here, but it really is a record that I feel like it's a fan favorite. People look back. I do have to say, I think when you think back to like early 2000s pop punk or that Drive-Thru era, just that part. I mean, it's a record people bring up. It's a record people talk about. One of my favorites from that era. Like, I'm sure you can't pinpoint why it's beloved or why it's a fan favorite. But is there anything that you personally think, like the reasons why Last Stop Suburbia, for 20 years people have loved it and it's still talked about and, again, seems to be overall like the fan favorite? Like, I mean, what do you think you would credit for it, having that longevity and it not being just forgotten 20 years later?
That's interesting. I don't know. I think maybe part of it has to do with just the fact that it's a fun record. Like we kind of talked about earlier. We were never a very serious band. We never really took ourselves very seriously. We never wrote lyrically about serious topics. And so I think because of that, it's one of those records that people can put on and it's just fun. It usually can put you in a good mood. It's not really, sad music that can bring you down or whatever. And I think it's just fun. And I think when you couple that with our live show, we tried to, really have a party on stage is kind of the way that we used to talk about it in the band. Is we like to just have a party. We like to go out and have fun and have a good time. And that's kind of the energy that we wanted to try to bring to stage and bring to that record. And I think that's probably what keeps people hooked on it, is that some of the songs are catchy, and it is just fun from start to finish. It's just a kind of a fun record, and it's not long. It's like, I don't know, what is it, 37 minutes or something like that, 38 minutes. It's not a terribly long record, so you can kind of get through it and feel good and then move on with your day.
No, it really, it is it is a fun record. Like you said, is really fun. I think it, year round it's good, but it really, I do think summertime is it is a good time to blast that thing on
Yeah,
on a
I can
nice
see that.
summer drive. Maybe
Right.
for other people. I don't know if you're allowed to blast Last Stop Suburbia. on
That might be a little strange for me.
Yeah, I don't know if you're allowed to do that, but I can, and I will tell you, it is a solid summer listen with the windows down. On a sunny day,
Sweet.
blasted it. But yeah, I mean, Tim, this has been great. Where can where can people find you? Where can they find Allister, Hot Alice, all your other bands? Where can they find you, your music online, like all that good stuff? Where do we go now?
Yeah, you can find all of my stuff on either Apple Music or Spotify. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I don't have Facebook, so you can't find me on there. But I do. I use Twitter regularly. I'm on Instagram every once in a while. The Allister does not have an Instagram page, but I think Allister, the band, actually has a Facebook page. I don't know what it is because I don't use it. But if you go on Facebook and search for Allister, I think you can find it. But yeah, other than that, you can find me personally on those platforms too.
Nice. Yeah, keep connected with Tim and the band. And again, I do want to say, unless you're listening to this in the future and Saturday, September 10th, 2022 has already happened, you can disregard it. But if it's not happened yet, 4-Chord Music Fest in Pittsburgh, and that's 2 days, really amazing lineup. I got now, I will say, you are personally my favorite on there, and I'm very excited to see you guys, but lots of great bands on that.
Thank you.
So it's going to be a good time, so make sure you go check that out. And it only makes sense now, if you're listening to the podcast, we'll play a song or two off Last Stop Suburbia, but for the radio show right now, we're going to play Last Stop Suburbia front to back. We got enough time to play the whole thing. So whichever one you're listening to, here we go. We'll start with track 1 like we were talking about earlier. I mean, perfect album opener. I can't imagine another song opening this record. So right now, here's Allister with Scratch off Last Stop Suburbia right here on the Power Chord Hour. Right here on the Power Chord Hour podcast, one of the most quintessential early 2000s pop punk songs. I mean, if you're trying to describe a sound, a time, an era to someone, doesn't get much better than that one. Right there was Allister with Somewhere on Fullerton. Before that was Allister with Overrated. Opening up that block of music was Allister with Scratch. All three of those jams off their album Last Stop Suburbia turned 20 this year. Huge thanks to Tim Rogner for calling in. I had such a fun time talking to him for the second time. If you've never heard our first interview, we did one back in 2019 when Allister put out their record 20 Years and Counting, where they re-recorded a bunch of classic Allister songs. And then they also did 1 or 2 new songs, which were really solid. I'm going to play Stay With Me, one of the songs they did for that record. It was a new one at the time. I guess now it's like 3 or 4 years old, but that was one with Scott Murphy on vocals, and really good song. I mean, really, I think Allister has another record in them. You know, I mean, Tim was talking about it a little bit in that interview, but I think Allister could put out another really solid record. But I cannot believe Life Behind Machines has been out for 10 years, including because that was really the first Allister record that like came out when I was a fan. Actually, there's 7-inch. You still can't do that on vinyl, which I also think Tim was talking about. I forgot to ask him, but he mentioned there was a song that they were working on during, I think, like Last Stop Suburbia that ended up on a 7-inch release later, and I believe what he was talking about was you still can't do that on vinyl, which came out in like 2011, I think, because Life Behind Machines was 2012. But just to think I had just found Allister not terribly long before that record came out, and now to think that's 10 years old, and Last Stop Suburbia is now 20, which I got Last Stop Suburbia for Christmas actually in 2010 on CD, and I don't think it was on vinyl yet. I do own a copy of Last Stop Suburbia on vinyl now, and I even have the test pressing as well. But at the time, that was not on record, and had to get that bad boy on CD. But I love that record. I mean, again, like I think when you're talking about, early 2000s pop punk, what the sound was like, I mean, just everything about it, I think that album represents it so well. I think that record has all the best aspects of what made that era of pop punk so much fun, And I think it aged really well, too. I think still as you listen to it, it hasn't lost it's a fun, simple record, and I think that's part of what makes it timeless, though, too. There's not much about it that, I guess, except for the sound. I mean, you can listen to it and, probably go, okay, that came out around, this certain era. But, overall, I don't think there's a lot about it that outdates it. I think the production is quite solid on it. Again, the songs are quite solid. I mean, they're just catchy, melodic. Like, that band can write a hook. Allister, what I love about Allister is they are a band where I think you know what you're getting out of an Allister record, but it's like, I think you need bands like that. I love bands that are like that, There's certain bands where it's like, you know what? Change things up, kind of surprise me on records and stuff like that. But then there's other ones where it's like I like the you're going to get something solid from them. Like, what you're going to get from Allister, but you also know that they're going to do something good. They're not just going to rehash a record, but they're going to make a really good, just catchy, pop punk album. I don't think any of their albums sound alike, but at the same time, they're all really fun pop punk records. So hopefully we get another one. I can't believe it's been 10 years since we got a full length of new songs. Again, they did that 20 years and counting and re-recorded all those songs. There were a couple new ones on there. But if you did miss that, I got to say they did some really solid re-recordings, and like I said too, those new songs on there are really solid. And I talked to Tim Rogner all about that back in 2019 pre-podcast interview, but that is up on the podcast feed. I put it up, probably like a year ago. It's been up for a little while. But my interview with Tim Rogner, our first one from a few years back, and you want to go check that out. That is up on the podcast feed as well as on our YouTube page. Or if you go to YouTube, maybe you're listening to us there. But if not, you go to YouTube, search Power Chord Hour, and you'll find all our past interviews there. But that's going to be this week's episode of the podcast. Happy 4th of July to you if you're listening to the day this came out. And so what else? Give us a follow at Power Chord Hour on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook if you would. That would be rad. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. That helps out a whole lot, as well as just telling a friend about us. If you got a punk and alternative loving friend who just needs a good podcast, music podcast in their life, here you go. Let them know about the Power Chord Hour. I would appreciate that greatly. New radio shows every Friday night on 107.9 WRFA in Jamestown, New York. You can stream the station on our website at WRFALP.com. I will be airing my interview with Tim this Friday on the radio show, and like you heard, I'll be playing all of Last Stop Suburbia front to back after the record. So if 3 songs weren't enough for you, we're playing another 14 on that radio show, along with a bunch more Allister. I mean, we go 8 to midnight, so Friday nights 8 to midnight Eastern. So we got lots of time after the interview to play Last Stop Suburbia and tons of other music. So we'll get into it, and I'll make sure I play stuff where if you're an Allister fan, I think you're gonna like what I play throughout the night. So big old Friday night show there for you. But that's going to be it until next week. So for the Power Chord Hour podcast, I'm Anthony Merchant. Thank you so much for listening.